This Pitch Breakfast video is brought to you by Spangler and Agins, attorneys for Charlotte's startup community.
Hi. You guys love show of hands. So by show of hands, just raise your hand if you've been diagnosed or know someone who's been diagnosed with colon cancer. Well, my hand's up. I mean, 5 months ago, one of my closest relatives was diagnosed with late-stage colon cancer. And seeing her go through the process of treatment and recovery, I saw that there's a huge inefficiency in the process right now. She was one in two, just like 2 in 3 Americans who isn't screened enough for colon cancer. And the reason why is because there's 2 different types of screening tests right now. And obviously higher screening leads to earlier detection of the cancer, which means that they can treat it easier. 94% of stage 1 patients survive 5 years, less than 10% stage 4 do. So the 2 different types of screening tests are either cheap and accessible, over the counter, take 5 minutes to get your results, but the accuracy is very low. The other type of test, you may have seen it on TV, it's called Cologuard. $600, prescription only, takes 2 weeks to get your results in a lab, but the accuracy is pretty high. So what we did was we took the cheap, accessible, over-the-counter one, 10 bucks, 5 minutes. We combined it with powerful artificial intelligence algorithms that take into account your age, your BMI, if you have a history of lesions, polyps, or cancer, and we combined them so that we had the same accuracy of the $600 test. We're 60 times cheaper and 4,000 times faster. So so we're a team of 4 right now with 2 advisors. I'm at Northeastern, my friends are at Yale, Penn, and Berkeley. We're trying to get clinical trials and FDA approval and a non-provisional patent filed. So in order to do that, we're seeking about $100,000 for a $5 million valuation. Thank you so much. I can provide a demo if you want to. Not of the actual chemical test, because I tried to find that at Walgreens, but they were out of stock. Sorry, I waited last minute, but I have the actual app here. It's a very simple app. I don't know if you can see it, probably not. But, so if you open the app here, it's basically based on an occult blood test. And basically, colon cancer is diagnosed through a non-invasive test. It just tests for occult, like hidden blood. They can only be seen on the microscopic level, and it's done through a biochemical test called the FIT. And basically, we take that, it takes 5 minutes to do. Check mark, was blood found in your stool? Have you had a history of lesions or polyps? Check mark, check mark. Age, let's see, 55. Smoked. Are you diabetic? Do you have family history? And what's your BMI? Submit. Within seconds, you have your results.
So if I understand this right,
yes, sir.
The inexpensive and less accurate test.
No, it's just as accurate.
No, I understand. Your thing is an add-on to that.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Yes,
okay, cool. So how much does the cheap test cost?
They're 30 bucks individually, but in bulk we can get 20 for 100. So we plan on selling them for $10 and keeping a 50% margin.
Right. And so we could go down to a drugstore theoretically, and they'd have one, and you could do it. Do you need a doctor or anything? You just know?
I mean, typically a doctor would recommend it for you, but you can go buy one by yourself.
And you do it on your own.
Yes, sir.
Sort of thing.
Completely at home, takes 10 minutes, like 5 minutes to do.
And so, how fast do you get the results? What's that test called? What's the cheap test called?
It's called the fecal immunochemical test, or the FIT for short.
Fine, FIT. Okay. So, if I wanted to go do a FIT test, could I be done in half an hour?
You could be done in 10 minutes.
Okay, right. Okay. And then how long to do the add-on with your thing?
Well, you saw me do it. It took about 30 seconds to do.
Okay, another minute or 2.
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. And how accurate is FIT plus CounteractIO compared to the expensive $600 thing?
Are you familiar with specificity and sensitivity? The metrics?
No. Not in the way you mean the question. No.
So specificity tells you the amount of false positives. So if I say that you have cancer, what are the chances that you actually don't have cancer? And sensitivity is the opposite. If you do have cancer, what are the chances that it'll say you don't have cancer? And the problem is the specificity is pretty high for things like the FIT test. That's 95% specificity. So if it says you have cancer, there's only a 5% chance that you don't.
But the other way is low. Yeah, right.
So oftentimes it'll say you don't have cancer when you really do, 25% of the time, which is really high. Cologuard has a 90% sensitivity and an 87% specificity.
That's the expensive one.
Right, that's a $600 one.
So cheap is 90 and 25, expensive
95
is...
and 75.
Okay, and so say those numbers, the cheap one is what?
Cheap one is 95 specificity, 75 sensitivity. So basically 25% of the people who take it will have cancer, but they'll say they don't.
And what's the expensive one? What is it?
It's called Cologuard. It has a 90% sensitivity and 87% specificity. So
And what is Fit plus U?
we are 92% sensitivity and I think 88% specificity.
And it costs $10
$10.
for the consumer.
Yes, sir.
That was really good. I thought your presentation was good.
Thank you. And just for context, it's the second most common cancer and the second most fatal, yet U.S. News ranks it as the #1 most preventable. So
I'm confused a little bit on the product. You have an app.
Yeah.
It's an add-on app. So the cost of the app, to buy it once is going to be $10? I don't quite get the...
Right. So it's
I've never heard of a disposable app. You load it up.
the app isn't one-time use only. It's the biochemical test. It's one-time use only. So we'll just give you the test in combination with an access token to let you take the test.
Okay, so you're going to use tokens to be able to access the app.
Yes, sir.
Got it. And then I think you should also, one other suggestion is market size, right? X number of people buy this, multiply it out, addressable market, what you're going after.
135,000 new patients every year just in the United States alone.
So I want to make sure I understand the fundamental premise of this.
Right.
So let's imagine the three of us, Chris, Seth, and I, each take the cheap test, right? Which there's some result to that, but you would say, based on our individual and familial histories, that should be interpreted differently. Is that correct?
He's saying we'll get a lot of false negatives, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we all go to Walgreens, we get our test, we do our thing, and let's say we all get the same reading out of it, like that test does. But then we're each going to enter different personal information into your app, right? Because we have different personal and family health histories.
Right.
And because of that,
It's
the
not just
result,
history.
the interpretation is going to be different.
Right. It also it's basically calculating your biological age because everyone ages differently. I mean, your chronological age might be, I don't know, like what are you, like 25?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So it's like.
And I look 90.
Even though I'm 18, but even though I'm 18, say a really, really, really good athlete might be, like 23 when he's really 18. So biological age takes into account your health and, what's your BMI, what's your chronological age, are you diabetic, do you smoke? So it's not just history, your familial history, it's also your personal history. Have you personally had a history of polyps or lesions, which are previous biomarkers of cancer?
So, yeah. Okay, so I don't think I have colon cancer. But I don't know, right?
Yes, sir.
It seems to me that the value proposition that you're laying out for a consumer is like pretty non-controversial. Like if you were like you guys, if you were gonna go, if you were worried that you might have colon cancer and you knew about, your name is Andy, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and you knew about Andy's app. After you did the thing at Walgreens, would you be willing to download his app and try and get more specificity? I would, right? I think most people who are in the condition of wondering whether or not they had colon cancer, if they had listened to this dialogue, if they had suffered through this dialogue, right, they would probably be willing to take the extra step to say, I'll see if I can get some additional information, right? I think a challenge I wonder what you're thinking about how you're going to solve is how are you going to get people to understand this delta among these tests, and how are you going to get them to know about your app and download it? Because it feels like you've got a pretty good value proposition, but it's really complicated, right? So how are you going to do? What are you going to do? Andy, now what? Right.
Well, basically, let's look at Cologuard. They're our main competitor. They're the $600 test, and they have all these barriers and whatnot. They're running TV ads right now, and they've been approved. We're basically looking for funds because we're all broke college students. Let's be real.
So let's talk about what you just said. We're looking for funds, and we're a bunch of college students.
Right.
So that's a status that makes investors nervous sometimes.
I understand that.
Right?
Yes, sir.
You're in college. It's not like you're full-time devoted to this, right? I'm sure I'm sure you're studying accounting, right? Which I highly recommend. So how would you convince me as a potential investor that this is something that you're,
Right.
how are you going to follow through and make this a commercial success,
I just
given your other demands?
I got off a call with an investor from Sequoia, a good friend of mine, on Monday, and he was telling me the same thing. I mean, we're college students. We're applying to a seed firm called Dorm Room Fund, and they specifically target college students. And on top of that, the product is already complete. So at this point, we're just waiting for clinical trials to come back. We're waiting for FDA approval. We don't need the need for full-time work is slowly dropping as we're just waiting for results and waiting for approvals. And it's just almost like a time game at this point. But we also have researchers that are willing to put their name behind this, that are willing to put the full-time work in. That we have 2 advisors at McGill and 1 at UC, and they're trying to get people to actually do clinical trials and actually get this thing approved. I forgot where I was going with this actually. Yeah, that awesome. So yeah, so again, we have people that are willing to work full time, and yeah, question for the audience.
So, a few questions. What is the end of the sample that you're using for your basis of your sensitivities?
What's
the size of the group, the end?
Okay, sorry. Well, as of now, we've had a very small sample set.
Small.
Just about 500 people. But we ran tenfold cross-validation on that to validate our metrics. So we consistently got.
I got it.
Okay.
So aren't you basically talking though about just, and I think this is where Greg was going originally, you're just putting a screening protocol on top of an actual biological diagnostic test. I'm having a hard time understanding how that's going to be defensive.
How is it not?
Because it's just a questionnaire. If I'm the company that sells the cheap test today, I can just add those questions to the lid of my box and say, call this number that your answer would go to this website that it puts in. So explain to me why you can't do that.
Well, and I'm with you a little bit, but aren't you their natural ally? Aren't you and the cheap test guy, don't you have the same enemy, the $600 guy?
Yeah, I mean,
shouldn't y'all team up and pick on the bully, right?
Yeah, I wasn't planning on competing with the cheap guys. Like you said, I was planning on partnering with them. And I don't see why someone would call a number and go through all that effort as opposed to just downloading an app and plugging points.
Have you spoken to that company yet?
There's a lot of companies that do it.
The generations are different. The
Right.
generation he's talking about is women of home. The generation that you're talking about is women down with that. I wouldn't worry about any of that mumbo jumbo. You're primed to blow if you target the right generation.
Right.
Not only old people get cancer, young people get cancer as well. So you're targeting the 7-year-old that's going to be 17 or 23.
Yeah, that's the point. It's for old people though, right? I mean,
We're more likely to download that.
Right, but what I'm saying is you're more likely to call a number now, but I'm not more likely to call a number 20 years from now.
right.
I'm on the line.
I'm sorry. Is there anything else I can do?
Now, how are you going to
Awesome.
compete with the doctor's offices that are offering this test, insurance actual coverage, genetic testing, and they're actually fill out the survey that's already offered genetic testing?
Well, sorry.
They already meet all these requirements because these are
Right.
standard procedures.
The FIT test, which is what we're basing our thing off of, has extremely high patient compliance. And most patients opt to take that instead of Cologuard, obviously due to the low price, high accessibility, and non-invasive nature. I mean, Cologuard's non-invasive too, but it's extremely expensive, prescription only, and availability is really limited. So we have really high patient compliance. So when the doctor gives you 2 options, you can pay $10 or $600, which one do you choose?
What if your insurance covers it?
I mean, insurance can only go so far though. I mean, it's at the same time, we're 60% cheaper. I mean, once you pay a lot for insurance, I mean, your insurance premiums are going to go up.
It's right now versus 2 weeks also.
Right.
And also, it's 5 minutes versus 2 weeks to get your
You
results.
can actually do your test right there in the office.
Exactly, that's what I would
And that's the only other colon cancer test?
There's only 2 out right there. They're screening tests. Yes, sir. Otherwise, you can do a colonoscopy, but you want to do a colonoscopy. Yes, ma'am.
So, to kind of go off of this gentleman over here and the gentleman up front, I understand your market is like an app, okay? So me personally,
She's got a good
And for
idea,
those
just
people
like,
who actually need it,
Right.
versus the younger people like me who don't necessarily need that.
Just because it's an app doesn't mean the patient has to download the app. The doctor can do it himself. I mean, when you're in when you're in an appointment, as opposed to getting the stool sample, waiting for 2 weeks to get your results, the doctor can just evaluate your results right there.
So why
Or
would
the-
the doctor use the app if he's got his own questionnaire and you're
That's not accurate. That's why this is a problem.
And a piece of paper can give you results faster than that.
Do you have doctors backing you?
I have a researcher at UC and a researcher at McGill, which is the top medical university in Canada.
All right, we have time for one more question.
I have a question in terms of, one, I think that partnering up with the lower end would be probably the way to go. But the second thing is, I download the app, I start answering the questions. I don't know what my BMI is. Now I'm putting in stuff just because I need the answer. Information in is only as good as information, you know, I mean, it's.
Right. BMI is just a ratio of your height to weight. So you put in your height and weight, calculates BMI for you.
All right, with that, let's say thank you to Counter